University of Colorado. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we do commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We'll do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, faculty, and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is respectful and inclusive. So all of that is important and reminds us of the theme of inclusion, which is a big one for us tonight. With all that said, I will now bring to the podium my colleague and clinical assistant professor in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences, Dr. Ryan Pollard. Ryan.
Suppose I should do this too. Like this. For those of you who don't know me, although I think most of you do, my name is Ryan Pollard. I am a clinical professor in the speech, language, and hearing sciences department. And I had a lot of this written, but it's already been covered. This is the kickoff event for this week's disability symposiums. So I do encourage all of you online. I don't know why I keep doing this for online. It's like really there, but it's hard to check out those events running Wednesday through Friday. Last time I checked, I think there were 10 presentations, so a lot to choose from. We've covered how this will run, but John will talk a bit about his new memoir, read from it, and then we will open up the floor to questions and answers, and I will be moderating that, I think, and then Pramila will also be having people remotely joining in that too. I'll just remind people that to please speak up with questions. Tonight's event is partially about hearing loss and living with that, and so that would be helpful. All right, so now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce John Cotter. John is an author of the memoir Losing Music. We actually did bring some copies back there on the back table. Should anyone want to pick one up, as Chance would have it, you can get it signed too by the actual author. No, author. John is also the author of the novel Under the Small Lights. He has published essays, theater pieces, fiction, and criticism in many top literary journals. He's also been a resident artist at the Space Gallery in Portland, Maine, and the James Merrill House in Stonington, Connecticut. He's worked as a teacher of environmental ethics, English literature, and history. And once upon a time, as is mentioned in the book, John was a writing instructor here on the CU Boulder campus. And so it's with great pleasure that please welcome me to, or please join me to welcome John back to CU to share his beautiful writing with us.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for that introduction. Thank you, Oliver, and thank you so much to all of you for coming, and for all of you on Zoom. And on Zoom. Thank you for all of my ancestors, my dead relatives. As I read this, some of the relatives. So it's a pleasure to see everybody here today. I'm author of Losing Music. My name is John, my pronouns he, him. I know that we want to get to the part of the evening where we have a little discussion, so I won't, read for a million years. Close though. So around the time I turned 30 years old, I started to lose my hearing. At first, I thought the car radio was malfunctioning. I'd be driving around and listening to a book on tape or a book on CD, I guess, or some music or something, and I would think maybe I'm misremembering it. I thought the bass was loud, or I think, oh, this reader is hard. It must be his British accent, right? That must be why I can't follow him. And gradually, it became obvious that there was something else going on. I'd be at work, and someone would be having a whole conversation with me. I wouldn't know what was happening. I would turn around, and there they would be. And I tried to play it off with a joke at first, because you can't act alarmed immediately, and you can't if someone's trying to talk to you at work and you can't hear them, you can't turn around and say, oh no. I would try to play it off. I'd say, oh, it's nothing really. Well, odd thing was that sometimes I seemed to be able to hear just fine. So some days I'd put a song on and I could hear the bass, and I could hear the flutes, and I could hear the timpani, I could hear the brushes on the drums. And then other days I would turn on music and it wasn't there. I could hardly hear it at all. It seemed to come and go and come and go. And this was interspaced with the vertigo attacks, right? Vertigo is distinct from dizziness. So when you have dizziness, you're a little unsteady. It's like when you're on a ship on the ocean. I guess those of you who are here in Colorado wouldn't, it's like a large lake. And you're on a boat on the ocean and it's rocking around. That's sort of dizziness. Vertigo is a little bit different. It's a little more unsettling, right? It's as though the room is spinning around you. And so that corner of the room becomes that corner of the room. And or as though you're falling, sensation of falling and not being able to stop falling. And these events would be very strange. I'd be making a little food for my wife, or she wasn't my wife at that time, for the woman I was seeing, and before I married her, and I'd be making a little food, and then all of a sudden I would feel like I was falling. But it wouldn't be a light sensation of falling, it'd be a profound sensation of falling. And I'd be grabbing onto the floor. And I'd be lying down. The first couple of times it happened, I thought I must be dying. I thought, well, this is what it feels like when you die. And eventually I went to see a otologist who said, well, you have Meniere's disease. Meniere's disease is hearing loss, it's vertigo, and it's tinnitus. I was hearing this hissing sound that would just show up in this low and this sort of high, and all at the same time. Sometimes they'd all rush in at the same time. But again, sometimes it would go away. And I'd feel just fine. And I said, well, tell me more about Meniere's disease. What causes it? What's the prognosis? What course can I expect that it will follow? And are there any treatments that are effective? And the answers were, nobody knows. And there are a number of treatments that have been prescribed for years. Benzodiazepines as an antiemetic, so that you don't throw up on yourself. But really, I think they're just there to calm you down when you have a vertigo attack, because unsettling, right? If you're in England, they give you beta histine, which is an antihistamine. Sometimes they give you a diuretic, right? Water pills, just to get all the salt out of your body, make you pee all the time. 3 times a night you're getting up to pee and you're thinking, gosh, I hope this is helping my ears. We'll try to find a study that shows efficacy. Try to find a study that has ever shown any of these treatments have any efficacy on the improvement of symptoms. Something that's indistinguishable from placebo. You can't. They don't exist because they were treatments originally prescribed in the 1930s, and physicians have anecdotal evidence that some of them will work, right? But of course, they give them to you as though this is the silver bullet, as though this is a sure thing. Well, anyway, not to ping on the poor physicians, they have it hard enough. So, a number of otologists that I went to see said, well, this doesn't seem like Meniere's disease. So, for example, in Meniere's disease, as it's described in the books, the tinnitus should accompany the vertigo and then abate when the vertigo abates. And as it's described in the books, your hearing should be getting progressively worse with time, whereas yours bounces back and out, back and down, up and down, and seemed to have done so for years. And my baseline would return to pretty good. It was baffling everybody. I thought, I got to go to the Mayo Clinic, because the Mayo Clinic's going to be able to figure this out. And of course, I was teaching all over the place, right? I was teaching here, I was adjuncting, which means you're teaching all over the place, right? So I'm telling you that. So I was adjuncting here, I was adjuncting for the rhetoric department, and I was adjuncting at the School of Mines, and I was adjuncting in an art school in Lakewood. I don't even know it still exists anymore. Very legitimate institution. And I was teaching night classes at a writing center called Lighthouse, right? I was doing all kinds of teaching. And some of those places, when I went to them and said, this is becoming too disruptive. I'm having trouble hearing the class. I may need hearing aids. I may need a little time off to get the hearing aids fitted and tuned. Might take a couple of weeks for them to come in, might take a little longer to get them fitted and tuned. What can we do about accommodations? Some of those places where I worked, like the School of Mines, said, well, of course, our adjuncts here are members of the family. What do you need? Some places where I worked, like Lighthouse, said, oh yeah, of course, whatever, we, cancel, delay a class, whatever you want. We'll postpone the thing for a couple of weeks. It doesn't, that's no big deal. Other places, they're not as good. Maybe I write about that in the book. Maybe I write about that in the book. On the back tape. So I'll read a few pages. So if with your permission, I'll read a few pages from my visit to Mayo Clinic. And this is the climactic moment of my visit to Mayo Clinic. So they put me in all the machines and run all the tests on me. And at first they said, oh, well, it sounds like it's a neurological disorder, right? And they did a bunch of tests and maybe it wasn't. And then maybe it could be a rare genetic disorder. We can test for that, but it's going to be more than you got, buddy, right? So I don't know, maybe still is, who knows? They thought, well, maybe it's an ocular problem, right? Jonathan Swift, the author of Gulliver's Travels, reported exactly the same symptoms in his lifetime. Gulliver's Travels, where, and they thought it was an ocular problem with him too. You know what the doctors at his time thought it was caused by? Eating too much fruit. A surfeit of golden pippins in Richmond. He said the tinnitus sounded like 1,000 oceans in his ears, or the sound of water mills. When anything loud happens in Gulliver's Travels, Lemuel Gulliver says it sounds like a water mill. He also says talking to the giants was like trying to talk to someone standing at the top of a church when you're standing down at the bottom. The little Lilliputians have such faint voices, they have to climb into his ear in order for him to hear them. He ends up making a cone for them to shout into. The treatments in his day, because you asked, were caustics, right? He'd put phosphorus on his skin and give himself burns because that would let the evil spirits out, right? This is the age of reason. This is the age of enlightenment. It's time in transition. It's a period in transition, right? To let the evil spirits out. Leeches to the buttocks, a clove of garlic inserted into honey and then into the ear canal, which he said guaranteed cure. As an old man, he lost a lot of his hearing, lost some of his vision. He said, I walk like a drunken man. I topple. He was passing an old tree one day, and he said, I shall be like that tree. I will die from the top. I'm thinking about this as I'm at the Mayo Clinic. So he's put us in all the machines, and here I am at another point. Mornings, we'd assemble with the other sufferers at the hotel's front entryway, but far back enough that we didn't trigger the automatic door. Only once the shuttle had arrived and its entry levered open did we scurry out of the hotel, breathing little blades of air. Oh, it's very cold. Very cold. You probably would have got that from them. Empty streets, through dirty windows. Technicians sometimes appeared surprised when I asked them what was going to happen in the machines. Now, well, we're going to tape these coils to your skin to test your autonomic reflexes. Well, what will I experience? Just, so I know. You'll feel tingling on your skin. Some people think it feels like bugs under their skin. Nervous about what the tests would reveal, nervous about the unknown, I'd recite all the Yeats I could in my head as procedures commenced. Hands, do what you bid. Bring the balloon of the mind. I'm seated in a closet-sized apparatus that jerks and spins in the dark while lasers track the movements of my eyes. And I will have some peace when I am there, for peace comes dropping slow. I click the button when I hear the noise. She bid me take life easy as the grass grows on the weirs. On the last day late in the afternoon, I sat in the office of the final specialist I'd meet on my visit, awaiting her appraisal. She arrived with a neutral expression, all business. Basically, she said, your ears are probably deformed. We can't see them, so we can't know exactly how. I see, I answered. My mother is there with me. She's brought my wife who has to work, so my mother was my +1 at the Mayo Clinic. You can bring a +1. I see. Could you be more specific at all about why this only started a few years back? Yes, she said, it's called Meniere's disease. She began to explain the characteristics of the average case, but I stopped her. Sorry, I know we have limited time. Did you look at the notes I sent ahead about the unusual aspects of my case? The way sound comes and goes, or why I need to use this cane? Because I was walking with a cane at that time. I read all the notes the other doctors have compiled for me. She was typing. But you didn't see my hearing chart over time. I saw the test you took here. There's damage. Right, but it comes and goes. That's unusual. I'd like to account for that, and if possible, to see if I can make it come and go a little less, or reduce the tinnitus, or what I see here is damage, she replied. I was a problem now, someone to be dispatched. I produced a copy of the hearing test I carry with me and scooted it onto her desk. Look at those numbers, rise and fall and rise and fall. Really, look here. Have you ever seen that happen? Your ears, she said, are really screwed up, okay? And we're not going to know why until you're dead and we cut you open. Can you read through the notes now, please? If she didn't have the time, I could make an appointment if I liked with a specialist. I felt the room spin. Wait, so you're not a specialist? Well, I'm an ENT, but you need to speak to an otologist or a neurotologist. They're booked and can't see you today. But we can't come back. I don't have any money, and my card is nearly maxed out with medical debt. We can't do this again. I'm skipping large parts because I want to get to the audiologist here. So I say, so I'll skip a little bit. Exasperated, she led me to the office of an audiologist. I was pleased. By now, most of the audiologists I'd met struck me as every bit as intelligent as most doctors, but there was a difference. Doctors tend to have far more stamina than most people. They need to, merely to survive the intensely competitive environment at medical school and the grueling 30-hour shifts of resident training. Because they're possessed of such stamina, they tend to assume that everyone else is too. An unhappy side effect can be a brusque manner with their patients. Why is this guy sitting there whining about a little ringing in his ear? Nothing compared to a day and a half in the ER during a pileup. This particular audiologist was thin and bald, with the passionate but otherworldly eyes of a mad scientist. I immediately felt confident he would diagnose me. Sit and face me. He took my chin in his hand and without warning, jerked my head to the right. And then again. Now the left. Ha! He said, I just caught something there that the test missed. All right. I'm going to ask you a series of yes/no questions. Do you get dizzy in malls, supermarkets, places like that? I was dizzy everywhere. I said yes. Do you get dizzy when something moves? Of course. How about staring at a screen? After that went on for a bit, he handed me a pamphlet and told me I had something introduced to the literature a few years prior, a condition known as chronic subjective dizziness. It's treated with antidepressants, but since it isn't entirely inside your head, we also use physical therapy. He recommended a specific physical therapist. Oh, you're lucky she's in Denver. When I managed to score an appointment later that month, she laid me flat on a table and set weights on my pelvis and legs. Then she activated a spinning tube that resembled a lampshade with lozenges cut from its surface. This projected a series of whirling lights against the wall. The idea was to provoke dizziness. It worked. Eventually, she said, after a number of weeks, this won't make you dizzy anymore. Or it shouldn't, if Mayo Clinic is correct. Several months later, no less dizzy than I'd arrived, we parted ways. But first she leveled with me. Mayo Clinic, she said, is going to tell you you have chronic subjective dizziness because one of their doctors invented it. We don't really know why people get CSD, my pamphlet reads. Going on to ask, how can I be sure that CSD is what I have? Answer, research studies show that if you fit the criteria for CSD described in the first section of this booklet and have had a complete evaluation, it's not likely that other diagnoses have been missed. So like Meniere's, chronic subjective dizziness is a diagnosis of exclusion, a lack of understanding made into a mouthful of air. We know that something is wrong, but not why. We know some treatments might ameliorate things here or there, but only for some patients. And we talk like we've got it nailed. The thing about specialists, a friend in financial journalism ventured, I'd been ghostwriting for him to make a little cash, is that even if they're only 80% sure of what's wrong with you, they sound as though they're 100% sure. And they sound that way every time. Another friend, a wise woman, said specialists come down to them deity, the supreme confidence that's often a load of bull. The certainty with which the Mayo audiologist assured me I had CTSD and the satisfied smile with which he typed out his instructions felt as solid to me as a concrete floor. He said in all probability I would lose my hearing in both ears and develop long-term balance problems, a condition called oscillopsia. I can skip the part where I describe what that is because you guys would know that stuff. I just wonder, I said on the morning of the concluding visit with my original Mayo internist, whether even if Meniere's disease ends up being as close as we can come to a diagnosis, I just wondered if maybe there was a new research you could recommend, some new drug, some reason for the radical and probably unsound hope, even another Mayo doctor I could teleconference with when I'm home. He shook his head. What you hear from one doctor at Mayo Clinic, you will hear from them all. Mayo Clinic is one of the most conservative our instructions and our diagnoses are standard throughout the enterprise. What about something like chronic Lyme? Should I investigate that? Again, he shook his head. Our policy is that chronic Lyme does not exist. I see. I was just coming here for a fresh take on things. I thought with so many brilliant minds together, I thought they might see my case afresh. Maybe save some hearing before it disappears. He said, the place you have come is one of the most conservative institutions in the world. Mayo's emphasis for most visits is less concerned with research than with standardization. All right, I get a bit about Mayo Clinic. So, I'm going to skip ahead because I feel like, I don't know. I'm reading this section, but I feel like it's a lot of, I seem very angry and resentful about what happened, don't I? And I didn't mean for that to come across. That's not what the book is like. It's just what this section happened to be like. So I'm going to read a little bit about adaptation, because at first, of course, I thought about what I was dealing with as a chronic illness or as an illness of some kind. I use this idea that medical model, right, of disability, which most people unconsciously use. And which is not to say medicine is useless, right? If you break a leg, you should get it set. But I didn't think of myself as disabled at the time, right? Which now I do. So I'll read one other little bit that's about adaptation, right? Adaptation to disability. So this is about my wife and I staying in Boston for a month as I'm researching the life of Jonathan Swift, because there's a little bit about Jonathan Swift, spoiler in the book. In the evenings, when Elisa and I collapsed ourselves into the apartment's couch, the heat from our bodies made it warmer still. I've been having the same dream every night, I told her. You know, the one where you find a closet you never noticed, and inside are all these things you didn't remember you owned. An old jean jacket, a blanket from when you were a kid, She spoke softly in response. She wasn't facing me. She was looking at an ood. I said, I didn't catch that. It's not your fault because I don't think I mentioned this to you before. I have hearing problems. Shocked. You do? I try to play it cool, but yeah, I'm hard of hearing. She let her jaw fall open. I had literally no idea. I'm so glad I've been able to play this off so smoothly. I leaned in to kiss her, and we wound up lying back on the couch together, her body wrapped in my arms. Hearing aids complicate intimacy, but it can be okay. You just have to learn how to hold your head. It becomes second nature. Put the back of your head to the pillow. Don't rest on your right or left side unless you support your head in a way that holds off the hinge squeak of feedback. Make a tripod of your fingers around the ear to give the machine space. You can brush your cheek against your partner's, but only to a point. You can embrace them completely, but there's a certain way you have to tilt your head, hold your neck. You train yourself. You wouldn't think anymore to do things otherwise. Eventually, you grow less shy about it. In the same way, I don't have shyness about asking restaurants for a seat against the wall, or asking others at a diner to switch so I can take in sound from one direction alone. Every place I go in the evenings, bars, coffee shops, friends' houses, I ask if we can sit outside. Often, indoor echoes are too much. Often, I nod and pretend. It's necessary to pretend. On bad days, Elisa imposed a limit for my own sanity on how often I could mention my ears. When they're bad now, meaning I can hardly hear at all, I tell it to her as a by the way, an incidental. What at first struck me as lonely making now feels like good instinct, good training. I'm acting as if. I complain less to myself now too. It's a stage that took a while to reach, but I've arrived. Most frustrations I feel now aren't with Elisa, but with strangers, and it's not the strangers I blame. To create a bond of intimacy, we lower our voices. In a room full of shouting kids, their mother will sotto voce the adult stuff in my ear. She's establishing intimacy, rhyme mutuality. But precisely because the kids are shouting, whatever she tells me is lost. I say what? And miss it a second time. I never do find out. Incidentals. The definition of low stakes, but still. My favorite barista confides in me out of habit. We like each other, we joke. So when I walk in, he comes up to the counter to confess, out of range of his boss's hearing, out of mind of the other patrons. He lowers his voice, even moves his lips as little as he can get away with. Mm-hmm. Each time I remind myself, it's the opposite of unfriendly. I'm invited into the conspiracy. But like a narc, I say, I'm sorry, what? I tell him again that I'm hard of hearing, and he nods and says, me too. Lots of people do that. So you amp it to, I'm deaf. And their fellow feeling diminishes not at all. Oh, totally, I'm deaf too. The word has no meaning. The world exists at arm's length. Gossip, caveats, you miss these. A wave of the hand. It's not important. It doesn't matter. Texture. My life in whispers. James Bond films when I was a kid. The mystery woman who warns him, you're in danger here. My mother hushed about what was wrong with Peg. It's cancer. My mom and dad on Christmas Eve, murmurs drifting upstairs. I heard the rustle of boxes and paper being set beneath the tree. My father's low voice, it's a lot this year, and how that thrilled me. Loud bars are bad until they're really loud, almost unbearably loud, at which point they become good. If everyone's shouting at the top of their lungs, I can take off my hearing aids and join the democracy. You can shout all kinds of things in a loud bar you could never say in a quiet one. You can shout like no one hears. Insinuation, sex. The old man who sat down beside me on a bench with a drink on the Santa Monica Pier. Like my barista, he barely moved his lips when he spoke. You're enough to drive Oscar Wilde. Action items I murmured into the throats of girls at clubs. Instructions in the dark. It wasn't that long ago. Stubbornly, it feels like I was someone else. I'm someone else now. I cup my head in that curious way on the couch, fingertips surrounding my ear, palm as far away as a palm can be in such a position, my weight on the back of my hand, and my wrist against the cushion. Elisa talks about what she's reading. I look at her lips. So, I could keep talking in a general way about my experience, but I think Ryan and I had talked about, Ryan, what should we do? Should you want to come up?
Yeah.
Ryan had talked about
That
joining me up here
will
and-
split this thing, but that's okay.
Go.
Maybe a woman, where
Would you like chairs to sit or?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I do that, sure.
Okay.
I've
I
experimented
think
with
it'll
that.
find you.
I'll grab this one here.
You okay?
I got it.
Watch.
Oh, yeah, so
Oh,
but thinking about it.
So, so we had talked about, opening it to questions from all wherever, from there and here. But, I wanted to begin by asking you a question. And this was a thing that we had briefly, discussed. Your book is called Losing Music, and you had said, how music, the experience of it had changed for you. And then you had mentioned that there's more change recently. It's not done. It's not a finished journey for you. Do you still listen to music? Are you still able to get what you once did from it, or has that changed as well?
What changed? I used to love Beethoven. I really can't hear him anymore. I mean, I can hear the loud parts, but that's about half of it. I can, certain instruments, I mean, Beethoven is very dynamic, unlike not every composer is, right? You look at like late Brahms, you look at Bach, right? Bach is not all that, not dynamic at all, really, right? Because he's working with harpsichords, he's working with violins. These things have to be loud, right? Organs, my God, right? Beethoven is the first composer who's working very seriously on the piano, right? And well, there's two parts of the piano. There's the piano part and the forte part. And I can hear the forte part. I can't hear the piano part. So there's a lot of music that I used to love that is just gone from me. I used to love what people who like classical music call new music, right? I used to love a lot of contemporary composers who write real soft stuff. And I liked it because it helped me to organize my thoughts. Gavin Bryars, I was a big fan of Gavin Bryars, and he would write pieces where the first 5 minutes, it's incredibly soft. And then it gradually rises and rises, and then it becomes quite loud, and then descends again. And that's a kind of journey. It's not the kind of journey I can go on anymore, right? It's lost to me. I'll hear silence for 10 minutes. The problem is I won't hear silence. I'll hear roaring. I'll hear tinnitus. It's like the first time I ever went to get my hearing tested. I went into the soundproof room. You'll have familiarity with those rooms. I went into the soundproof room, and the door closed. I almost said, "It's loud in here," because of the tinnitus in my head, of course, because I could hear it very loud. Thank heaven for hearing aids, because they need some of that, some of it, not all of it. And of course, the sounds in my ears change day to day. So some days I think, okay, I can try a little Bach today. I can do this, right? Not necessarily, right? Glenn Gould's 1980s Goldberg variations, when he's more sort of soft and measured, but the one from the 50s where he's just crazy and over caffeinated and really banging on the keys. Nice thing about new pop music is that it's designed to be loud. But a lot of the stuff I like wasn't new. Sometimes I'd be driving around with my wife when I could hear better than I can now, because my hearing has descended. And I would say, today's a good day, so let me be in charge of the music. And I would try to pick it. Or I would say, we'd be going to a cookout and I would say, I don't care if they're playing music in the background, because I'll be able to hear it and I'll be able to hear them. My hearing is that good today. I can take the hearing aids off. And then I'd get there and the music would be Traveling Wilburys.
It was not my choice.
And he's gone now, and that's good. There's a certain range, a certain pitch that I hear pretty well. With Meniere's has a typical, the loss has a certain shape, right? You lose the low end, eventually maybe you lose the high end too, right? That bit in the middle there, violins, trumpets, something that is pretty consistent all the way through. So Bach's partitas on violin, right? Heifetz playing the partitas, I can hear that. Not every day, not on days when my hearing is unusually bad, because it's still, my hearing varies widely from day to day, right? So some days I hear pretty good. In fact, it was only a few days ago, I had my hearing aids off for most of the morning. I ran an errand, and I couldn't hear great, but I could get by without them. Most days that's not the case, and some days even with them, I'm functionally deaf, right? Lowercase d deaf, right? I'm functionally, you should use the word that way. I'm functionally hearing impaired doesn't seem dramatic enough. I'm not taking anything in. The way they used to use the word deaf in the 18th century, in the 20th century, right? But I can often hear trumpets. I'm listening to a lot more jazz, right? I was listening to some jazz before I came in today. This is terrific session player. I can't remember his name now. Anyway, maybe I'll remember it later. But yeah, strange relationship. Is that what you were asking? Yeah. Long answer.
Thank you. Pramila, do you want to see?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, Pramila, are there any questions from our Zoom guests?
Not right now. If any Zoom guests have any questions, please put them in the chat for us.
So while we're waiting on that, do we have any questions from the live people? In person, I should say. Yes.
So after going through this process of kind of the hearing loss and the good and bad days, do you think, has it changed your opinion on whether like deafness and hearing loss or how they're portrayed in like media and such?
It depends on the media, I guess, and it depends on when it was made. I'm pretty forgiving of the past, because I think the past is the past. So for example, I'll read a Turgenev short story in which a character is described as deaf, the way we'd use the word now, signs and so forth. And is the depiction a little condescending? I mean, maybe it is, but it was the 19th century. Was it better than maybe a lot of depictions in the 19th century? If it was, then maybe it's fine. Maybe I sort of don't care. I think a lot of portrayals of people with hearing loss are ageism, right? I mean, it's thinly veiled ageism. It's the way we make fun of older people. It's so funny because I've learned, since starting to lose my hearing, I've learned that a lot of people I've met in my life were losing their hearing. I just didn't know. They never told me, because I'm doing the things they used to do. So my grandfather, for example, he's not around anymore, but I remember as he was getting older, he would stand closer and closer to me when he'd be talking to me, or I would say something and then he would just kind of roll on as though I hadn't said it. He would just kind of keep talking. And I was a little kid. I didn't think anything of it. Or I saw his hearing aid and I thought, oh, well, who knows? Maybe he uses that sometimes and it makes everything better. I mean, I think people don't understand how hearing aids work. I think that they think that they're like eyeglasses, where you put them on and it fixes things. I mean, they certainly feel that way about cochlear implants. So, I will, when my hearing started to slip and I got a pair of hearing aids here at CU, Corey, my audiologist, was a wonderful guy. I should have told him I was giving this little talk. Maybe another time. Should have sent him a note. I should have sent him a copy of the book too, because I mentioned him in the acknowledgments. He read one of the chapters. I'm ungrateful. He was great, but when I first got fitted with hearing aids, I would tell people like, oh, I'm wearing these things now. And they would say, well, what about cochlear implants? Could you get those? Just no conception that like, no, absolutely not, right? I still have a lot of hearing. Of course I wouldn't get cochlear implants, right? Do you know how that changes your experience? It's a whole different thing, but they just they do. People still ask all the time, they say, are you a good candidate for cochlear implants? And I do try to talk about it. I say no. I say, I'm just, what a shame I'm not. And just kind of move on. I mean, one thing that I do feel like I feel like I can't fight every battle. And I feel like if I see a depiction of hearing loss in media, that I feel like even if it gets things wrong, if it has its heart in the right place, at least that's something. If it's trying, if it feels more like cruelty, like an attempt to laugh at someone, that I feel differently about that. But I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between hearing loss. I get very mixed up on terminology because I don't know, different people have different terminology they prefer, right? Capital D deaf culture. A lot of people will say to me, are you learning to sign? And I'll say, yes, I'm learning to sign. And they would say, are you fluent? Are you good at it? And I will say, who the hell would I practice with? I don't have, I started losing my hearing when I was 30 years old. I had a whole group of friends who are very dear to me. I had a professional network. I started losing my hearing, and one friend, she said to me, I think she was trying to be nice. She said, it's a great opportunity, she said, to, make all new friends. And I thought to myself, does she not like me? I think people don't realize what a small percentage of people with hearing loss use sign language to communicate. I was having dinner with somebody the other day, and he said, isn't it crazy how every country has their own sign language? He said, I think that's so stupid. He said, why can't they just pick one? Why can't they just pick one? He said, I mean, just get together and pick one. And I said, well, I can answer that question. I said, I know it was rhetorical, but I can answer it. I said, you notice how they also have their own languages. And getting everyone together is really hard, and people don't really listen. The irony. I who cannot listen, say to others who can, they listen. But he'll just say like, I think stupid, I mean, I think people are a little bit incurious. I certainly want to get better at signing, and I certainly want to be able to, but I'm never going to be fluent. And I think it would be a charade to pretend that I would be, it's never going to be. I've passed the language acquisition stage in life. And I think we don't sort of acknowledge that if you become disabled later in life, well, I mean, look, there's advantages and disadvantages to everything. I don't need to imply one is better or worse. I don't. It can be harder to pick up some things that some people have known all along. And I think we acquire language better when we're younger. And I think people who are disabled have a lot of extra burdens placed on them, as of course a lot of you know. And learning another language is something I don't always have time for. I'm trying to pass. As we all know, passing is the ethical decision. That's being sarcastic.
I did see at least one comment.
Yep, we have a couple of questions here from the audience online. So Dr. Sean O'Neill, CU Boulder Department of Critical Ethnic Studies, is asking, can you talk about silences? Do you analyze silence a beneficial context? And if so, please explain.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could offer you a longer answer. I'm unfortunately the last person to ask about silence because I never experienced it. I haven't experienced silence since maybe 2013. At all times, I have a humming, whistling, roaring, buzzing, or rushing sound in my ears. It changes from day to day, from hour to hour. And there doesn't seem to be anything to be done about it. You know, medicine has realized there's a lot they can't fix, which is a good thing, right? Western medicine has realized there's a lot they can't fix to the traditional approaches. So they're trying to sort of colonize Eastern approaches, but in a way that strips them of all context. So, you know, I recently, this isn't very interesting. It's not related, but maybe it's interesting. I don't know. Who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? I'm the one giving the presentation. I broke a bone and I had a little, I damaged a nerve, right? So I had a little pain. And they don't give you, when you have pain, they don't give you painkillers anymore for very good reasons, right? But instead of saying, you know, and they don't, but they also don't say, you know, try to take a cold shower and just think, you know, just, you know, try not to think about it so much. Instead, they sort of put me on with a pain psychologist. And the pain psychologist wanted me to use mindfulness, you know? And she would say, well, try to use mindfulness on your pain. And there's a whole workbook about it, you know? And I bought it. I spent like $26 on this. I read it too, on this workbook about using mindfulness. And I thought it would be kind of new strategies, but actually it's all the stuff I used to learn when I was sitting Samatha Vipassana meditation, but stripped of any relationship to Tibetan Buddhism. Any relationship with anything that isn't pure clinical language. And anything personal is wrung out of it, so it's the most impersonal thing you could encounter, which doesn't make it attractive to anybody. Particularly since they're not promising, they said, you know, at best 10% improvement, but hey, that's not nothing. Well, when I started to deal with tinnitus, I was asked by an audiologist not here at CU, would I participate in a mindfulness study on tinnitus? I thought mindfulness was about the absolute worst thing you could do for tinnitus, because whenever, I don't know if a lot of you have done sitting meditation, it's Boulder, so I assume all of you, right? When you know, one of the things they'll say is, you know, pay attention to what you hear. What are the noises that you hear, you know? And of course, the noise was the roaring inside my own head. One of the chapters I call no satori, which is a Tibetan term, but it's because I didn't find it wasn't the road for me. So I miss silence badly. I mean, I think people have written a lot of good stuff on silence. There's a lot of good books out there. Particularly monastic traditions. I play sounds to try to approximate silence sometimes. I think the best I can do to hear silence now is to be distracted. But people more perceptive and intelligent than I am have pointed out that real silence doesn't ever exist. You know, John Cage told that story about, the composer John Cage told that story about going into this room that was supposedly, you know, the most quiet, and it's underground somewhere in the Midwest, right? Do you know about this? Did somebody know about this? There's this room underground somewhere.
It's in BYU.
That's right, it is. You know, that's what, of course, because he wouldn't want to travel far to do this. He wanted to do it at lunch. So, do you know much about it? Is it down a few floors in the basement or something?
I think so, yeah, it is, and it's you know, it's got the foam on the wall, super duper thick foam. It's the quietest room I think in the world, and so a lot of people can't stay in that room for very long because you can start to hear sounds in your ears and like in your body, the flow of your blood is that quiet.
John Cage, when he gave a lecture about it, he said, they said to me outside, I said I could hear a high sound and a low sound. They said, yes, the low sound is your circulatory system. The high sound is your nervous system. So, I mean, I don't know that silence exists. I mean, I certainly do experience noise, however. And I think the absence of noise is devoutly to be wished. I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm grateful to you for asking it. I also don't know if I answered your question satisfactorily.
No, you did fine.
Do you worry about the portrayals? Do you feel a responsibility for portrayals of disability in media?
Interesting question. I don't know, it's complicated, like you said, because you do have portrayals where it's sort of like you're not there's like stuff there that is wrong, but like you can see that they've got like a good heart with it. But there's also portrayals where it's just sort of like, well, that's just all wrong and you're just doing this to be hurtful.
Right.
So I think it's one of those complicated questions, because I've also got my own grandparent actually has a similar vertigo disease. So I find myself worrying more and more often of like, what do I do to make the world better for them? And I'm like, I don't really know how to do that.
Oh, yeah, there's a, I think they would love a copy of Losing Music.
Before we started a little late, so we'll go just a little late. But I know there was a question from Tammy Frederickson. I think I saw that, Tammy, about recognizing that we have clinicians here, and as you said, you've had some bad experiences. What might be a good clinical experience? But I think, Pramila, can you read what Tammy said? I think she said it better than I did.
Sure. She was asking, do you have any words of wisdom for future speech and hearing professionals?
I've never met a speech and hearing professional I didn't like. Presuming we're excluding MDs, right? I've never met a PhD who studied the subject who I didn't like. I mean, one of the things that I like so much about the audiologist I've worked with, I've never worked with a speech pathologist, so I only have so much experience to speak from, is that they listen and look for solutions. You know, I didn't talk on the phone for about a year because I was no longer able to. I had a set of hearing aids where the Bluetooth was crap, right? It didn't really work. And they tried to set me up with a coil alternative, but it was so impractical it wasn't worth it. And I couldn't get used to it. And for a while I'd been holding the phone up to my ear, but it wasn't working anymore. Couldn't do it. And right now, the Bluetooth I have on these hearing aids is pretty good, actually. So I can often use the phone. It depends on the voice of the person I'm speaking with, you know, how clearly they speak, etc. No one ever faces you when they talk. I noticed that. So, you know, but there was a period of time, about a year, where I didn't use the phone. And Corey, my audiologist here, I told him all this. I told him, you know, I just told you. And he said, well, how about a pair of just like really high-powered headphones? What if you put those on? And I said, well, you know, I've tried earbuds. And he's like, no, it's something that just cancels out your whole, you know, I've never been a headphone guy. I always played my music really loud. And in fact, I was probably starting to lose my hearing earlier than I thought I was, because I would often have people knock on my door and say, it's not the music, it's good music, but you're playing it too loud, you know? So I wasn't a headphone person. And so I went out and bought an expensive pair of headphones, you know, not wireless. I had wireless ones, but you know, you got to plug in, and it worked. I could talk on the phone, again, not with everybody, but some people, you know? And that was because Corey sat out. I hope you get to see this one day, buddy. Thank you. Corey just listened to what I was saying and thought to himself, how can I think outside the box? How can I offer a solution for this guy based on what he's got, you know? Knowing there's no perfect fix, knowing that he's only, you know, he just wants to help, but if he can help 10%, if he can help 20%, that's great, that's a win. I often found that medical doctors it's a differential diagnosis. So they're unchecking boxes. So you come into their office and every box is checked. And so they ask you 3 or 4 questions and half the boxes are unchecked. And I've often met medical doctors who say, if I don't know what's wrong with the patient in the first 5 minutes, I'm not going to know. You can run every test in the world and I'm not going to. The reason I've met several people who said that is because I've quoted it back to new doctors I meet and they say, yes, that's true. I'll deny it if you ever quote it, but it's true. It's certainly true. And I think most doctors actually are good people with the best interest of the patient at heart. I don't mean to Dr. Bash, right? I mean, they've given us a lot of wonderful things. And I think they tend to be well-intentioned, and I think they have their problems too. I don't mean to sound unempathetic. I do think that they're pressured to spend less and less time with patients. I wish we had universal health insurance. I think doctors documenting their own visits during appointments can sometimes work against the appointment because they spend a lot of time on documentation and not a lot of time talking to the patient. I understand all the reasons why that's desirable, so I don't have a solution. I think treating people as individuals, and that's so difficult because when you look for symptoms and when you do a differential, what you're looking is what group does this person belong to? You know, it's like using 7 questions to guess. It's like an algorithm thinks. It's like the way Netflix uses 7 questions to decide what, rotten TV show to offer you, I think it's not an individual experience. And I think places like Mayo Clinic, well, I certainly understand the advantages of some place like a Mayo Clinic. I think if every doctor is on the same page, as I talked about in the excerpt I read, well, that has downsides too. What I always wanted from doctors was the sense that after I left their consulting room, they were going to go back to their private office and look things up for 5 or 10 minutes and think about it on their own and just check, have they met any studies recently? Am I sure I'm up to speed on all of this? And I have a GP right now, an internist, I shouldn't say GP. I have an internist right now who's a really smart guy, he does do things like that. He comes in having done his research and his homework and having new ideas to try. And I think a lot of doctors are not like that. I think there's a hardness and a softness to a lot of specialists that I've talked to. I think a lot of them are people of means. I mean, a lot of otologists that I met are, middle-aged white men from comfortable backgrounds who have real similar perspectives. They all get dinner at conferences. And I know all their names now. It's not exclusive. I mean, some of them are quite brilliant. I think, but doctors also, like I said, it's hard to earn a medical degree. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fortitude. It's a lot of stamina. And people are built different. So I think maybe some specialists, particularly, I think you're more likely to find a sympathetic internist. Might be unsympathetic toward a weakness in a patient. But I don't mean to be, this sounds very score settling, and that's really not my program. I'm anxious to one day meet an otologist. I thought Dr. Carol Foster here at CU, well, she's not here anymore. So I wonder what happened. I don't know. No one told me. But she was very understanding and listened and was a great otologist. And I said, why have you been so good? And the others have not been any good. Right. And then I thought, well, maybe, she's a woman. They were all men. That could have to do with it. And then she said, oh, I have been used.
And we just saw the note that she retired.
Oh, she retired. That can mean anything. I believe it. She was a good doctor. I'm sorry to hear it.
Would you like to say anything about the books or anything kind of to conclude and lead us to the next step?
I think, are we about at time?
Yeah, it's about 15 after almost. Neat.
Well,
There was one comment from Eva Lacey who also mentioned that a lot of shared experiences here, and it's very hard to be hard of hearing in higher ed.
I'm not in higher ed anymore. I left. I wanted to stay. I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. It was a passion for me. I actually thought teaching is what I'm best at. I still teach, but I don't teach in higher ed anymore because, I didn't have a full-time job. I was adjuncting when I fell ill, and it was too late at that point. If I was on contract, if I was on a durable contract and I had a union, etc., looking out for me, I would have been able to negotiate accommodations. Maybe, Maybe if the book does okay, who knows? Things can change. But yes, anyway, I appreciate the comment and solidarity. I admire that you're still doing it. I'm impressed. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I came here to talk to you, not to try to sell books. They are in the back. If you want to get one, just come and see me. You know, let's say they're on sale. You can get one for $20 if you want. Right. I also have a QR code from the press. You'd rather just get it on your phone, but it's also okay if you don't. I was glad to be able to spend time with you today. Thank you for coming.
Great, well, thank you all for being here. I don't know if there's any additional food or if they cleaned that
There's
all
not,
up.
they grabbed it.
Like the
All
vacuum.
the students like bought it.
Red off.
I did grab extra cookies.
You're wise.
All right, well, thank you so much, and I'll talk to Pramila here, and we'll wrap that up as well.
Lots of appreciation and thank yous from the Zoom attendees.
It's yours.
Okay, thank you, Pramila.
Thank you. Allowing me to have it, and I want you to sign it.
No, they said, are there any?
I have my card. I'm about to be the passion next meeting. I know.
Yeah. Underwater.
Spelled it E-R-I-K-A?
E-R-I-K.
That's what I thought. I mean, I basically know, but it never hurts to check.